Look like Becky Hammond is not happy with A'ja Wilson for her lack of performance in this first game.
The lights were bright, the stage was set, and the Las Vegas Aces were expected to dominate. A'ja Wilson had just been crowned the league's MVP, surrounded by cheers, cameras, and celebration. But only hours later, the script flipped in the most humiliating way possible. Instead of leading her team with the energy and power that won her the award, Wilson had one of her worst performances of the season, and the Indiana Fever seized the moment to expose every weakness.
This is kind of funny, bro, because A'ja Wilson was presented the MVP today. Oh, they brought out all the bells and whistles for A'ja Wilson, bro, and I'm here to tell you, oh, she played horribly bad.
Fans couldn't believe the collapse, and even her own coach, Becky Hammond, could barely contain her anger. Hammond didn't just sound frustrated in her post-game comments, she looked embarrassed, humiliated that her championship team had been outplayed so thoroughly. And when she exploded on Wilson's struggles, the message was clear: no one is safe from accountability. But this meltdown was only the beginning of the story.
And Becky Hammond was a little mad about it. Well, actually, she seemed kind of embarrassed to have lost to the Indiana Fever the way they lost, because Kelsey Mitchell went and got a belt from out the locker room, and you know a belt. She wrapped the belt around her hand, and she bent A'ja Wilson over. She gave her a nice little waka, because that's what happened today.
The night was supposed to be a crowning moment for A'ja Wilson. Before the game even tipped off, the arena buzzed with anticipation as the league officially honored her with the MVP award. The presentation had all the sparkle you'd expect: music, cheers, and a standing ovation from fans who believed they were witnessing history. It felt like the perfect start to a playoff run. But what followed was the exact opposite of what the Las Vegas Aces needed. The spotlight that was meant to elevate Wilson instead became a glaring reminder of the pressure that comes with being the face of the league. From the opening quarter, Wilson looked out of rhythm. Shots she normally buried with ease clanged off the rim. Layups rolled out in heartbreaking fashion, and the Fever wasted no time capitalizing on her off night.
Becky, all that being said, is there maybe something to be said for the fact that it looked like at times your team was getting some shots and they were just rattling in and out? There were shots that seemed like that they've been falling and they just didn't.
Yeah, well, there's those shots, and then there's the layups that we missed. I mean, we at least missed 9, maybe 10. I know we had about 6 or 7 at halftime, and the trend kind of continued of missing layups.
Social media lit up with brutal commentary, mocking the irony of the MVP failing to perform on the very day she was celebrated. For a player of Wilson's caliber, the weight of expectation is relentless. Fans didn't just want her to play well, they demanded a performance worthy of the award. Instead, they got hesitation, missed opportunities, and a version of Wilson that seemed a step behind. What made it worse was the contrast on the other side of the court. Indiana's Kelsey Mitchell was everything Wilson wasn't that night: sharp, aggressive, and completely locked in.
Now, we know that Kelsey Mitchell was nominated as the 5th player to be voted for to win the MVP. Now, we know, as of recently, Kelsey Mitchell been looking like she's the best damn player in the W. Now, I am here to tell you, I cannot say the same about A'ja Wilson, and Becky Hammond was a little mad about it.
While Wilson faltered, Mitchell torched the Aces' defense with shot after shot. The Fever's energy soared, and every basket felt like another layer of embarrassment for Las Vegas. For the Aces, it wasn't just a physical defeat, it was a symbolic one. Their leader had been celebrated as the best player in the league, yet her counterpart dominated the floor in every category.
You brought up Kelsey Mitchell, but what about the way she was playing today made it so difficult for you guys to slow her down? Or what about the way you guys couldn't defend her was the issue?
Well, one, she made every freaking shot, it seemed like. Long twos, short twos, threes, get the free throw line. You know, she had a hot night, and we let her get going. I mean, she had 17 at half and continued that.
The cameras caught Becky Hammond's face multiple times during Wilson's struggles, and the frustration was impossible to miss. At first, she tried to mask it, clapping her hands and urging her team forward. But as the mistakes piled up, the disappointment showed. This wasn't just about one player missing shots, it was about a team collapsing under the weight of expectation. The MVP ceremony had raised the stakes, and now the fall looked even steeper. By the time the game slipped away, The story wasn't just the Fever's victory. It was the humiliation of the Aces on their own stage, with their star unable to deliver.
Speaking of Asia's off night, what would you attribute that to?
I think she just missed. Honestly, she had a lot of great looks. She just missed, and that happens. Even the greatest players have nights off, like where they miss.
Fans who came to celebrate Wilson left with doubts, and the media wasted no time questioning whether Las Vegas had become too dependent on her greatness. And while Wilson's struggles were glaring, the real story was still to come. Because Becky Hammond, known for her blunt honesty, wasn't about to let this slide. What she said afterward made it clear this wasn't simply a bad night. It was a warning shot for the entire team.
I think that I've heard you talk about this before, but like your team's ability to handle a game where Asia is not able to like dominate, where would you guys rank your level of concern surrounding that, and how do you guys kind of fix that?
It's not necessarily my level of concern. I know we're capable, but not when we play like that. You know, God forbid Asia doesn't drop 40 for us. But we had 12 assists tonight in 40 minutes, 12, and 12 turnovers. But you could start on the defensive end. I mean, clearly we had no answer for Mitchell. Couldn't even attempt to slow her down a little bit. I thought it was really poor, really poor.
When the final buzzer sounded, the Indiana Fever walked off with confidence, while the Las Vegas Aces trudged toward the locker room. But the real storm was waiting in the post-game press conference, and its center was Becky Hammond. Known for her poise and sharp basketball mind, Hammond didn't hold back as she dissected the loss. Her words weren't measured to soften the blow. They carried the sting of embarrassment. For a coach who prides herself on discipline and execution, watching her team collapse after celebrating their MVP was more than a loss. It was an insult. Hammond's frustration came through immediately. She pointed at the offensive stagnation that left the Aces scrambling all night. 12 assists in 40 minutes was all her team could muster, a stat line that exposed selfish play and a lack of ball movement. To make matters worse, they matched those 12 assists with 12 turnovers. For Hammond, it was an unacceptable ratio, one that highlighted just how poorly the team shared the floor. She emphasized how often her players stood still, settling for contested shots rather than creating open looks. The very identity of the Aces' fast, fluid, and unselfish basketball was nowhere to be found. She didn't stop there. Hammond zeroed in on the missed opportunities that could have turned the game around. The Aces missed as many as 10 layups, a staggering number for a team stacked with talent. "That's 20 points left on the board," Hammond snapped, visibly disgusted. To her, it wasn't just bad luck or off-shooting. It was carelessness, a lack of focus when the moment demanded precision. Missing jumpers was one thing, but missing point-blank chances reflected a team that wasn't locked in mentally. Her critique then shifted to defense, where the Aces looked just as lost. Hammond bluntly admitted they had no answer for Kelsey Mitchell, who sliced through the defense with ease. Screens went unchallenged, closeouts were lazy, and physicality was non-existent. The Fever played with pep and urgency, while the Aces looked flat and unmotivated. For Hammond, that was the most embarrassing part. It wasn't simply that Mitchell got hot, it was that her team offered little resistance. She accused them of dying on screens, giving up on plays, and lacking the effort required to claw back into the game. But perhaps the most telling part of Hammond's comments was her tone. She didn't just sound like a coach frustrated by a single loss. She sounded like a leader embarrassed by how her team carried themselves. The MVP ceremony had created an expectation of dominance, yet the Aces folded the moment things didn't go their way. Hammond knew the optics, their superstar honored, then immediately outplayed, and she wasn't about to let her players shrug it off as just one game. Her message was loud and clear. If A'ja Wilson wasn't dominating, the rest of the team needed to step up. And on this night, nobody did. But as sharp as Hammond's words were, the spotlight was about to swing fully onto the player who made her the angriest, because Kelsey Mitchell's brilliance had turned Wilson's struggles into a national talking point. While A'ja Wilson's struggles became the headline, Kelsey Mitchell was busy writing her own story, one that made the Indiana Fever's victory look inevitable. From the moment the ball tipped, Mitchell played with a fire that Las Vegas simply couldn't match. She was quick off the dribble, relentless in her shot selection, and refused to let the Aces find any rhythm on defense. By halftime, she already had 17 points, and the momentum she created carried through the rest of the night. Every time Las Vegas threatened to claw back, Mitchell crushed their hopes with another dagger. Her performance was a masterclass in seizing the moment. Long twos, contested threes, aggressive drives, it didn't matter. Mitchell made shots from every spot on the floor. What made it even more demoralizing for the Aces was her confidence. She wasn't rattled by double teams or pressured into bad looks. Instead, she thrived, forcing Hammond's defense to chase her in circles. And while Hammond rotated players to contain her, it became clear that no single defender could handle the assignment. The Fever didn't just rely on Mitchell's scoring, they fed off her energy. Moving with the pace and physicality that exposed Vegas' flat effort, what made Mitchell's dominance sting more was the contrast with Wilson. On the very day Wilson received her MVP trophy, Mitchell looked like the best player on the court. Fans online didn't waste the opportunity to point it out. Clips of Mitchell's hot streak circulated with captions mocking Wilson's performance. The irony was brutal, the league's official MVP being outshined by a player who, in that moment, looked unstoppable. Hammond herself admitted after the game that Mitchell made every freaking shot, and while that may have been slight exaggeration, it captured the helplessness the Aces felt. They weren't just beaten physically, they were outworked mentally. Mitchell's ability to keep scoring forced Vegas to tighten up offensively, pressing on every possession, which only led to more turnovers and rushed shots. The Fever smelled blood, and Mitchell kept slicing through their defense like it was practice by the second half. Mitchell's swagger had infected her teammates. The Fever bench rose with every basket. The energy in the building shifted. And suddenly, Indiana looked like the more seasoned playoff team. For Las Vegas, it was humiliating. A squad built around championship experience was being dismantled by a hungry opponent, led by one player who refused to cool off. The night that was supposed to belong to A'ja Wilson turned into Kelsey Mitchell's showcase. The Fever star didn't just outplay the MVP, she exposed the fragility of a team overly dependent on one player's success. And that comparison only fueled the narrative that Wilson's struggles were bigger than just a bad shooting night. Because if Mitchell could dominate so thoroughly, what did that say about the Aces' defense and their ability to withstand pressure when their superstar faltered? The questions were piling up, and all of them pointed back to Wilson. And soon, the microscope would zoom in on her worst night of the season. When you carry the title of MVP, every performance is magnified. For A'ja Wilson, this game was supposed to cement her dominance, but instead it exposed her vulnerability. From the opening minutes, something felt off. Her footwork looked hesitant, her mid-range jumper lacked its usual snap, and even the simple shots, the ones she usually converts without thought, betrayed her. Fans watched in disbelief as layup after layup rolled off the rim. What should have been a victory lap turned into a nightmarish collapse, and there was no hiding from it. Wilson's stat line didn't tell the full story. Yes, she missed a lot of shots, but it was how she missed them that raised eyebrows. Wide open looks went begging. Easy finishes under the basket clanked away. Those momentum-shifting plays that normally spark her teammates only drained their energy. The Aces fed her the ball in hopes she'd break the slump, but every miss tightened the grip Indiana had on the game. Afterward, Becky Hammond was quick to defend her star. She explained that Wilson had plenty of good looks and just couldn't convert. In Hammond's words, even the greatest players have nights like this, and she wasn't wrong. Every superstar, no matter how gifted, runs into games where nothing falls. But the issue wasn't just Wilson's shooting. It was how exposed the team looked without her dominance. When she wasn't the force of nature they counted on, the Aces had no plan B. Her teammates admitted as much. They spoke about the pressure she faces, double teams, triple teams, and constant physical play from defenders determined to wear her down. They acknowledged they didn't do enough to create easier shots for her, relying too heavily on isolation plays that allowed Indiana to collapse the paint. Wilson was stranded, fighting through waves of defense with little relief. And the more she struggled, the more the Fever smelled blood. But beyond the technical breakdown, there was a psychological weight to Wilson's performance. Being honored as MVP hours before the game only magnified every miss. Each shot that rimmed out felt heavier, each possession more suffocating. Fans weren't just watching a star have an off night, they were watching the league's best player crumble under the biggest spotlight. The contrast was devastating. Still, Hammond insisted this wasn't a long-term concern. She reminded everyone that Wilson doesn't lay 2 stinkers in a row, and history supports that. Wilson has built a reputation for bouncing back stronger after adversity, using tough nights as fuel for dominance. But even with that reassurance, the optics of this collapse left a mark. The MVP wasn't supposed to look human, let alone fragile. And yet for 40 minutes, A'ja Wilson looked like both. But Wilson's struggles weren't the only problem. The Aces as a whole looked stagnant, predictable, and overwhelmed. Their offensive identity, built on speed and movement, had vanished. And Hammond knew exactly where the breakdown started. If there was one number that haunted the Las Vegas Aces after the loss, it was this: 12 assists in 40 minutes of basketball. For a team built on ball movement, spacing, and fluid offense, that stat told the whole story. The Aces looked stuck, their rhythm shattered, their chemistry broken. Instead of the fast-paced, free-flowing system that had won them games all season, the offense devolved into isolation plays, stagnant possessions, and rushed shots that made them look more like a pickup squad than a championship-caliber team. Becky Hammond didn't mince words. She pointed out that her players weren't moving the ball, weren't cutting off screens, and weren't creating for one another. The result was a predictable offense where Indiana defenders didn't have to work hard. They clogged the paint, dared Las Vegas to beat them from the perimeter, and forced contested looks, possession after possession. The Aces fell right into the trap, settling for jumpers instead of fighting for high-percentage shots. The missed layups made things even worse. Hammond revealed the Aces missed as many as 9 or 10 gimme shots at the rim that any elite team should convert. That's nearly 20 points left on the floor. And in a playoff game, that kind of waste is unforgivable. Those misses didn't just hurt the scoreboard, they crushed momentum. Every botched layup turned into transition fuel for Indiana, who sprinted down the court and punished Vegas before they could reset. It was a double blow: missed opportunities on one end, easy baskets surrendered on the other. Players themselves admitted the offense felt heavy, almost forced. Danielle Robinson, who came off the bench, said the team lacked the spark and aggressiveness needed to create open looks for others. Too often, guards were dribbling into traffic, settling for tough shots off the bounce instead of driving and kicking out to shooters. The result was isolation-heavy basketball that left Wilson stranded and the rest of the team frustrated. Hammond even tried to shake things up by going small, stacking the lineup with offensive weapons in hopes of sparking a comeback, and for a moment, it worked. The Aces cut the lead to 5. But once again, the lack of discipline caught up with them. Instead of riding the ball movement and spacing that had worked, they reverted back to the same mistakes. The Fever quickly slammed the door with a run that left Las Vegas stunned. What made it more embarrassing was how completely the Aces abandoned their identity. This was a team that prided itself on unselfish play, spreading the floor, and punishing defenses with relentless pace. Yet on this night, they looked like a group of individuals, each trying to solve the problem alone. Hammond knew it, the players knew it, and the fans saw it. Without Wilson dominating, their offense collapsed into chaos. But as poor as the offense was, Hammond made it clear: scoring wasn't the only issue. The real collapse came on the other side of the ball, where the Aces' defense, usually their anchor, was shredded beyond recognition. If the offense was shaky, the defense was downright disastrous. Becky Hammond didn't sugarcoat it. She called her team's effort really poor and admitted they had no answer for Kelsey Mitchell or the Fever's fast-paced attack. For a squad that built its reputation on grit and toughness, the Aces looked unrecognizable on the defensive end. Screens went unchallenged, rotations came late, and second efforts were almost non-existent. Hammond was blunt. Her players died on screens and failed to pursue plays with the intensity needed to stop an opponent hungry for an upset. From the opening quarter, Indiana dictated the pace. Every possession seemed to expose a hole in Las Vegas defense. Mitchell, in particular, carved through them with ease, pulling up for threes, mid-range jumpers, or drawing contact on drives. It wasn't just her shot-making that hurt. It was how easily she got to her spots. The Aces lacked physicality, allowing Mitchell and her teammates to build confidence with every possession. Hammond stressed that great defense requires second and third efforts, the relentless hustle to recover. after being beaten on the first move, but the Aces weren't willing to give those extra efforts. Instead, they looked flat, almost resigned, as if the early struggles on offense had drained their will to fight. That lack of fire only emboldened the Fever, who played with energy and urgency at every turn. The stats told the story. Indiana racked up points in transition, exploiting Las Vegas' slow recoveries. Whenever the Aces trimmed the deficit, the Fever responded by attacking the rim or burying wide-open jumpers created by lazy rotations. Hammond grew visibly irritated as the game wore on, pacing the sidelines, shouting for effort that never truly came. Her frustration wasn't just about missed assignments, it was about attitude. Defense is often as much about will as it is about skill, and the Aces showed neither. Even the players admitted afterward that they weren't aggressive enough. Jackie Young confessed that the Fever's pace left them reeling, while others admitted they failed to match Indiana's physicality. The irony was painful. The referees were allowing a physical game, yet the Aces never took advantage. Instead, they absorbed the punishment while offering little resistance in return. Momentum swings highlighted just how costly the defensive collapse was. At one point in the third quarter, Las Vegas cut the lead to 3, sparking hope of a comeback. But immediately after, the Fever unleashed a 10-0 run, blowing the game wide open again. Those runs weren't built on spectacular plays. They came from the Aces failing to contest shots, failing to secure rebounds, and failing to close quarters strong. For Hammond, this wasn't just a tactical failure, it was an indictment of effort. She had warned her team before that they couldn't rely solely on Aja Wilson to carry them, and this game proved her point. Without collective intensity, their defense was a revolving door. And as bad as it was, the most painful part was still to come. Because not only did the Aces crumble on defense, they collapsed in the most crucial moments. The closing minutes where champions are supposed to shine. Championship teams are defined by how they finish games. They know how to withstand pressure, seize momentum, and close out quarters with authority. But in this matchup, the Las Vegas Aces did the exact opposite. Each time they clawed back into striking distance, they unraveled in the final minutes of a quarter, handing the Indiana Fever every ounce of momentum. For Becky Hammond, this wasn't just frustrating, it was humiliating. The most glaring collapse came late in the third. After a furious push, the Aces trimmed the deficit to just 3 points. The energy in the arena shifted, and for a brief moment, it looked like Las Vegas had finally woken up. But almost immediately, the Fever responded with a devastating 10-0 run, extending the lead back into double digits before the quarter ended. That swing didn't just hurt on the scoreboard. It broke the Aces' spirit. They entered the fourth quarter looking deflated, as if the fight had been drained from them. Hammond has preached all season about the importance of finishing quarters strong. Knowing how pivotal those final 2 minutes can be, close out the quarter with discipline, and you enter the next frame with confidence. Collapse, and the momentum tilts against you. On this night, the Aces repeatedly chose the latter. The Fever ended quarters on their terms, running with pace, pushing in transition, and converting open looks, while Las Vegas stood flat, dash-footed. The players admitted afterward that closing quarters has been a recurring issue. They acknowledged lapses in focus, mental fatigue, and a lack of urgency when it mattered most. In the playoffs, those weaknesses get magnified, and the Fever wasted no time exploiting them. Instead of slowing down and running smart possessions, the Aces rushed shots, forced bad looks, and left the door wide open for Indiana to capitalize. What made these collapses so damning was how preventable they were. Hammond pointed to simple breakdowns, lazy closeouts, poor communication, and a lack of defensive rebounding. Even when the Aces managed to make a stop, they often failed to secure the board, giving the Fever second-chance opportunities. Those extra possessions added fuel to Indiana's confidence and left Las Vegas digging themselves deeper into a hole. The fourth quarter became more of the same. Each time Las Vegas threatened to rally, the Fever answered with clutch baskets. The Aces couldn't string together stops, and their offense sputtered under the pressure. Instead of executing with poise, they panicked, taking contested shots early in the clock and turning the ball over. Hammond could only watch as her team crumbled in the very moments they were supposed to rise. By the end of the game, the narrative was undeniable. The Aces had failed when it mattered most. Their inability to close quarters had cost them the chance to steal back momentum, and it exposed deeper issues of discipline and mental toughness. But perhaps the most painful truth was still waiting, because underneath all the collapses, all the miscues, and all the defensive lapses, one problem stood above the rest. The Aces had no answer when their MVP couldn't carry them, and that lack of support left A'ja Wilson stranded on an island. For all the criticism A'ja Wilson faced after her rough outing, the reality is she was left stranded by her teammates. On a night when the MVP desperately needed help, the Aces offered little more than frustration and missed opportunities. Indiana's defense had one mission: swarm Wilson at every touch. She was double-teamed the moment she caught the ball, and often faced a third defender crashing in. That kind of pressure is suffocating for any player, no matter how talented. The expectation was that her teammates would punish the Fever for overcommitting, but that never happened. Instead, the Aces stood stagnant. Rather than creating easy looks for Wilson with pick and rolls, off-ball screens, or quick passes, they settled into predictable isolation sets. Guards dribbled endlessly without purpose, wings hesitated on open shots, and the spacing shrank until Wilson had no room to breathe. It was a nightmare scenario for a star player who needed relief, and it highlighted just how dependent the Aces had become on her. Heroics.players admitted afterward that they didn't do enough. They spoke about how Wilson can't carry the load alone, especially when defenses are locked on her. They pointed to the need for more catch-and-shoot opportunities, better spacing, and quicker decision-making to keep defenses honest. But in the heat of the game, those adjustments never came. Time after time, Wilson was forced to muscle through double coverage while her teammates watched. The result was predictable: missed shots, turnovers, and mounting frustration. Even Becky Hammond acknowledged the lack of support. While defending Wilson's effort, she emphasized that the responsibility falls on the entire roster. She explained that it's on everyone to create offense when their superstar isn't hitting shots. Not just wait for her to figure it out. Hammond reminded the media that Wilson rarely has two bad games in a row. But the bigger issue wasn't her slump. It was how quickly the rest of the team crumbled without her dominance. What made it sting more was how Indiana played the opposite way. The Fever didn't lean solely on Kelsey Mitchell. While Mitchell carried the scoring load, her teammates moved with purpose, setting screens, cutting hard, and knocking down shots when the defense collapsed on her. That balance allowed Mitchell to shine even brighter. In contrast, the Aces looked like 5 individuals instead of a unit, leaving Wilson to face an impossible task alone. The loss revealed a painful truth: Las Vegas can't survive in the playoffs if Wilson is their only weapon. Other stars like Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, and Jackie Young must step up and deliver when defenses key in on Wilson. Without that balance, the Aces will continue to live and die by one player's performance, a dangerous formula against hungry opponents, and as Game 1 proved. The moment Wilson faltered, the entire house of cards came crashing down. Now the question loomed: would the Aces regroup? Or had the Fever exposed the fatal flaw that could end their championship run before it even begins? The stage was supposed to belong to A'ja Wilson, but instead it became a showcase of everything wrong with the Las Vegas Aces. On the night she was crowned MVP, her worst performance collided with a team-wide collapse that left Becky Hammond embarrassed and furious. The offense sputtered, the defense crumbled, and the Aces looked fragile without their star carrying the load. Kelsey Mitchell's brilliance only magnified the gap, proving Indiana had the fight and balance that Vegas lacked. Hammond's blunt words after the game weren't just criticism, they were a wake-up call. This wasn't about one-off night. It was about a championship team suddenly looking vulnerable when their leader stumbled. Now, the Aces face a critical test. Will they respond with the resilience that built their dynasty? Or did the Fever expose the cracks that could shatter their title hopes before the journey even begins?